We're gonna talk about comics from Devil's Due. It's something you wondered if Talking Joe would ever do. I guess we'll explain it all to you. Gonna take some time to read the books we've never read.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the best and longest running dedicated G.I. Joe comics podcast. If you are new to the show, you can find out all of the details over at the website, which is talkingjoe.co.uk. Now, this show, we are continuing our look at the Disavowed era of G.I. Joe, but it's not a look at the comics in detail. It is a special interview episode. Now, we'll find out who we're talking to in a second if you haven't read the description. But without further ado, let me introduce my co-host who will be joining me on this adventure. It's a real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark. And hello, listeners.
And hello, Mr. Guest. Who we will speak to now, joining us, is Andrew Swenson. He is credited as the military consultant for Brandon Jerwa's era of the G.I. Joe books. Basically, issue 25, when Brandon Jerwa picked things up, through to issue 43, his last issue, as well as the Master Apprentice miniseries. So, welcome to the show, Drew.
Hello, yeah, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Excellent. Glad to have you on. It's always a delight to sort of speak to some people that are involved in the comics and, find out how this thing is made. What are the, machinations that happen behind the scenes?
But usually we start by asking a guest such as you, Drew, about what your earliest connection to G.I. Joe was. When? Comics, toys, animation?
Yeah, that's a great intro. Let's see here. If I go way back, and you're talking to a guy who's, pushing 50 years old, so I don't like to talk about that. But going back, I think it was about 1983, and we took a family vacation out east, and there I saw the G.I. Joe toys on the shelf. I believe it was the 83 wave, and just fell in love with them. I think my brother and I each got a figure, and that very night we were begging our mom to go back to get another figure the next day, and we did. And it really set it off from there. So we came back. I should jump back. I live in the upper Midwest of the U.S., and when we got back to our home, many of my neighbor friends thought they were fantastic too. So we probably kicked off the whole love of G.I. Joe for our entire neighborhood at that point. And then I think we discovered the cartoons, and shortly after I saw probably a comic book in a grocery store and started collecting from there.
Did you try and get every issue? Were you already a comic book reader?
Oh, I think I had the odd superhero comic book here and there. But let's see here. Back then when I started, I would have been, I think, 9 or 10 years old. So I wasn't at the point where I was getting every issue till about probably issue, I'm going to say maybe around 21, 22. Then at that point, then I was collecting every issue as it came out.
And did you have a toy store or department stores near you at home where you could keep getting more toys?
Yeah, there was a small one, though they didn't have much in the way of G.I. Joe early on until it just boomed. Maybe 84, 85 kind of got a lot bigger where, every toy store was carrying it. So for us, growing up in a town of about 20,000 in central Wisconsin, we oftentimes shopped when we went to a larger city such as Milwaukee, and they had Target stores and kind of larger department stores that were carrying it earlier on. So we looked forward to those trips for sure.
I've got a slightly random left field question here for you, Drew.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be putting together a Christmas special podcast, and I'm going to be sort of inserting some little bits of audio into that. So I thought it might be an opportune time to get a little bit of a Christmas slice of nostalgia from you. So Andrew Swenson, military consultant for Brandon Jerwa's G.I. Joe. Can you answer me this question? Do you have any particular memories of G.I. Joe at your childhood Christmas times? Was this a time for you to be getting like the bases, the big vehicles, and finding them under the Christmas tree?
Yeah, that's always a fun thing to talk about, isn't it? So I do have a number of memories of G.I. Joe at birthdays and Christmas for, I'd say, a good number of years in a row. One in particular was the year, boy, I hope I'm doing this right, I think 84, 85 was the year when, my brother and I came down to the tree in the morning, and he had, I think, the Sky Striker and the Whale, I want to say. And I believe I had the Mauler, I want to say, maybe one of the bases as well, the Dragonfly. So that was probably one of the fondest Christmas memories I have. We thought we had died and gone to Christmas heaven. So we, even as a family getting together and having to go to church later that day, that was just torture because it took us away from our new toys that we love so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I mean, here's a little tidbit too: is my dad was so type A, God bless his soul. He would stay up all night putting all the stickers on ahead of time because yeah, he couldn't stand the kid play stickers that might be crooked all over the place. So when we went down in the morning, the stickers were already on, and he had gotten about 20 minutes of sleep total.
That is amazing, because I was going to say, like, a typical experience for a G.I. Joe collector at Christmas is that it's underneath the tree, but you can't play for it for a good few hours because, you got church, you got, Christmas Day lunch, etc. And then you've got to get that toy out of the box, put it together, put the stickers on. That's some, serious playtime being eaten into there.
Oh, that was daunting. If later on, I obviously put my own stickers on, but, in the beginning, you'd see some of those sheets. I mean, that was incredible. All the do not steps. Well, my dad had to have all of those stickers on complete. So, I mean, I don't even want to know how long it took him.
So you mentioned getting the comic book at a local grocery store and then later getting every issue. Was there a comic book store in your life, or were you going to the grocery store and other newsstands?
Oh, fantastic question. So small town of about 20,000, right? So, I mean, it was Marshfield, Wisconsin. So at first it was just a local grocery store, but I want to say right around the time G.I. Joe was booming, or just a little before, a little ma and pa comic book store opened up right in the downtown. Wonderful people, great little shop, fun place to go. And so I started going there on a regular basis. They kind of got to know me as the kid who came in for the G.I. Joe comics. And so then it switched to that. It did start off, though, with grocery stores.
What was the comic book store called?
Oh, my gosh. I knew you were going to ask me that. I can't remember offhand.
All right. How about this? Could you walk or ride your bike, take the bus there? Or were you dependent upon grown-ups to get you there?
Oh, man, you've done this before. These are good questions. It was definitely within bike riding distance. We also lived in a neighborhood that butted up against railroad tracks. And so oftentimes my friend and I would go down. It was kind of a down-a-hill experience. We'd go down the hill to the railroad tracks, and we'd almost like the Stand By Me scene. We'd walk the railroad tracks all the way into town, which took us within 2 or 3 stores of the comic book shop, grab our comics and then just walk the tracks back.
Zooming out a little bit, was G.I. Joe your favorite? Were there other toys or kid activities like sports or, building models or Lego or, He-Man? Were there other things, or was G.I. Joe the top?
For me, G.I. Joe was definitely at the top. I recall enjoying castle Legos as well, but it had to only be the castle kind.
The yellow castles.
With the yellow one?
There was only one yellow castle, Mark.
Yeah, there was only one yellow, and about the time...
I still have my brother's yellow castle, Mark.
I'm sorry. About the time they switched to gray, I think, is when I got into them. I have a kind of interesting childhood. I grew up next to neighbors. Everybody knows that kid who got every toy under the sun. And so we were very restricted. We weren't deprived, but we were restricted. And so we kind of picked our favorites, and that's what we stuck with.
Uh-huh.
My neighbors, however, got everything. So I did play with He-Man. Oh, man, I'm trying to think. Just everything. Dungeons & Dragons toys. Goodness. Really anything you can think of. Even the obscure things at their house. Yeah.
Did your neighbor have a flag?
A flag? Yes, he did. Yes, they did. It was 2 boys, and they did have a flag. In fact, I was able to set that up in my house for a short while. I kind of, I don't know if I bartered something, or I don't know. I got them to allow it for about 2 or 3 months.
Wow.
Nice.
But I did not have one
Amazing.
myself.
So, was there a point where you got out of G.I. Joe?
Oh, yeah, a couple times, actually. It's funny. So I think I got a little pressure in the late 80s, maybe after 88 or so. Just feeling a little bit of peer pressure that, you've got these toys. What do you still have them for? So we had a big garage sale, and I sold almost all of them, except for possibly the Mauler. And it wasn't a year, half a year after that I realized I had made a mistake. So I went about, there was no eBay then. So I went about finding these things all over the place from friends who didn't want them and kind of recollecting most of what I had lost and then some. And then I had gone off to the military, had come back, done college, and at that point didn't have space or time for the thing. So I sold off the collection again, except for there again, I believe the Mauler and a few figures. And then in the about the early eBay years, so maybe let's say 97, 98-ish, it started all over again.
Yeah, the dawning of eBay and realizing what you can get on there is sort of, I think a lot of people have had that that awakening and going a little bit crazy of like, what? All of these things, they're sort of just within a few mouse clicks.
Right. Delivered to your door.
So you glossed over the sort of military there, but I think we'll probably come back to that because it will have some bearing on how you ended up sort of working on there.
Sure.
In terms of the comics, did you generally follow G.I. Joe until the bitter end at 155, or did you drop off along the way?
I followed pretty well all the way through, let's say 110 or so, maybe 120. The comics took a little different turn at that point, started to get much more fantastic. I think at some point Transformers were involved, different things like that, costume changes. And that, they mirrored the toy line as well in the early 90s. And at that point, I think I collected the comics, but I didn't do a whole lot of reading. It was more of just let's finish the collection. And that did continue to 155.
Yeah, I get that completely.
Were you reading comics in 2001 when G.I. Joe came back?
Yeah. So when Devil's Due grabbed the license and we had this kind of rebirth, and I think it just, I don't know, it was in the air. It just seemed like everybody and their brother were ready for this rebirth, and we were all pretty excited about it. The boards opened up at Devil's Due, and you could just feel it, you could feel the excitement. And, whether you liked the direction that they took, I believe it was some nanomites or something, or you didn't, either way, G.I. Joe was back on the shelf. And so I was definitely reading as they were coming out.
Yeah, I think I remember you being on the boards. Were you called Recondo on the boards?
I was.
Yeah, I was somewhat addicted to the boards as well at the time. It was a great little sort of community, as you say. It was in the air, and everyone was sort of just really excited for G.I. Joe to be coming back. Mm-hmm. Actually, talking about your handle there, Recondo. I'm guessing he's your favorite. Is there a particular connection to that figure or character?
Well, yeah, I think both. Okay, so, when I was a kid, I thought he was fantastic. There were a number of them. I had a couple others that were my favorites. And for some reason, that was a particular figure. We all know of the ones that were real hard to find. Firefly might have been one of them, that sort of thing. He, for some reason, was real tough to find for at least the kids in my neighborhood. So I had gotten the figure, and when we all got together to play, it was almost like the commercials that they used to show that Hasbro used to put out. It really was like that in my neighborhood. You'd all bring out a couple of your favorite toys, your figures. We'd all be in the back, little woods and setting up little scenes and things, and there'd be 4, 5, 6 boys all playing together. It was pretty magical, but he was always going to be, the one that represented me, the one I kind of got to control, if you will, in our play. And then he also, I think his birthplace is Wheaton, Wisconsin. So being from Wisconsin, I kind of felt like, hey, he best represented me, or at least my childhood G.I. Joe persona. Okay,
so I guess you were getting back to that. You were involved. You were reading the comics. You were active in the community on the boards, and then at some point you make the leap from not just reading and chatting away on the message boards. You're a credited person on the team. So how did that all come about?
All right, so it was pretty neat. And I give all the credit to Brandon Jerwa. Brandon was easily one of the most approachable, quote unquote, famous people, at least in our community. And he was on the boards as well. We had found out that he had gotten the nod for doing a mini series, and then he ended up getting the regular series. I think he started off with a Chuckles mini series, I want to say.
That's right, in Frontline.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. And then when he got the go ahead to continue on the regular series, I just threw a chat out to him, or a private message, just saying, if you're looking for someone to help out, I'd love to. At the time, he had, I want to say, someone else helping him, who I think was probably doing a fantastic job, but for some reason he was keen to have me join him, and then it was all him. He wanted to make sure I got credit. He and I would talk about scripts. It wasn't just a matter of going over. I'm probably jumping ahead in your questions here, sorry, but it wasn't just a matter of going over the military part just to make sure it was accurate. It started off like that, but then we started just seeing each other as creative partners in some of the storylines. Most of it was him, and then I would come up with ideas, and we'd banter back and forth about how we wanted to do this or that, and he was always very open to suggestions, which was really fun for me.
Cool. And how did that particular title of Military Consultation, how did that link back to the kind of experience, the real world experience that you'd had?
Yeah, that's good. So in 92, I had gone to the Army. I always kind of knew I would, join the military at some point. I have a military family, and my father and his father before him. And so I was in the military for about 2.5 years, and then transferred to the National Guard after that, Wisconsin National Guard, and continued through till 2000 or so. So even during that time, right up until that time, I should say, I think I had just gotten done with 7 total years in the military, or 7.5 or so.
Forgive me, this is my ignorance as a non-USA citizen here, but is the National Guard, is that a branch of the military, or is it kind of like a volunteer service, or is it like a full-time military occupation?
No, it's not full-time. You're looking at it's basically part-time. It's called the Army National Guard. It's a little different than the Army Reserves. The National Guard's assigned to the state. Each state has their National Guard, but it's part of the Army umbrella. And then you basically do one kind of weekend of training every month, and then 2 or 3 weeks during the summer, typically, for training, just to kind of keep up your skills and whatnot. But it's not the same as regular Army by any means.
And then you'd be called upon in an emergency.
You might, yeah, and that could be a state required emergency, such as natural disaster, things like that. You could also be called up, and many units were during the various military conflicts recently. Mm-hmm. So it really was to the discretion of the governor.
I see.
How often were you communicating with Brandon Jerwa, sort of at the maximum?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. So we had, I've got a stack of scripts here that I was able to dig up, and I'm glad I kept them.
Wow.
I actually started, it was a little off because by the time Devil's Due, whoever controlled the print, sent the books to print, I actually started in number 23 or 22, but I wasn't credited until I think 25. But then in reverse, I think the last issue I want to say that I helped on, at least in the main run, was 39 or 40. But then I continued to be credited, for a few books after that. So I guess it all comes out in the wash. And then I also did help with Master and Apprentice, and Snake Eyes Declassified as well. It was a fun project. Uh-huh.
So this was only email with Brandon Jerwa, or were you on the phone? Did you meet in person?
Yeah, you're right. I didn't answer your question. This was on the phone mostly. We did emails back and forth, but we were talking. We talked several nights a week. It's a labor intensive job. What he did, it's a lot of back and forth on the creative side and kind of rolling things over, revisiting them things. So God bless my wife. I'd probably be on the phone with him for sometimes an hour or two, going over the script, and then I would take some time to just go through and kind of see what I could suggest, read it very carefully, go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and then we'd, reconvene on that, and then make some changes if we needed to, or make some creative changes sometimes, and then we'd work on the next one.
Do you remember the kinds of changes that you might suggest? Because at the time as a reader, I assumed that this was, previously the G.I. Joe writer had been in the military and also kept up on stuff through research.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, who salutes who in what order, who gets stationed where, that kind of thing, hierarchy was just going to be correct, like who used what kind of equipment. And Josh Blaylock was a young writer who hadn't been in the military, and the same with Jerwa. And so as a reader at the time, I thought, okay, this person who's got this credit is making sure that the writer isn't sort of getting anything wrong with like formality in the military. But I imagine it's more than that, things that I sort of couldn't imagine. And you've spoken just now to some creative decisions, but what were the kinds of things that you might have suggested or corrected?
You kind of already touched on a lot of it. I think we noticed even as a fandom, I've got a number of close friends who were on the boards back then, and actually some of them actually even helped peripherally with the comic. I can get into that later. But, we kind of see some errors here and there, the ones of us that knew. And by no means am I saying anything negative about Josh and his writing, his storytelling. I think he was highly talented. But there would be a little things here and there that you could tell he didn't understand quite about military, just the little details that Larry Hama had no problems with. And so that's where I think the military consultation came about. And Brandon was always open to that. So I would go through a script and, if there was something, maybe terminology, sometimes he'd write in there, what would I use, like you just have in parentheses, what would I use to describe this, and so, would this be a wave off or a dust off or, what are we looking at here, with aircraft or et cetera. You're right about the saluting, although I don't remember that being something that was part of any of the scripts. Terminology.
I bring that one up because someone pointed out that in the animated G.I. Joe Resolute, someone saluted to someone else who shouldn't have.
Oh, sure.
But
sure.
I'm sorry. Please continue.
No, you're right. You do pick those things up. Yeah. So it would be maybe how someone would refer to a unit, or just mostly terminology. Certainly military slang would be something that I could contribute a little bit. That might sound, pretty neat. I also helped a little bit with the military research if I didn't know, especially when coming up with, some of the new characters. If we wanted to add a little bit of a military background, I would do some research for him. We did a bunch of things, even we did some character profiles for Wizards of the Coast at the time when the card game came out. And that required, even though they cut it down to almost nothing, that actually required a lot of various research because we really wanted to get it right. We did a few file cards for Hasbro with some of their figures that they actually put out. They had asked us to do. So I guess we did the best we could.
Mark, did we know that? Did we know that some of the figures around 2004 or 5 had file cards written or with contributions from military consultants for the Devil's Due comic?
Now that it's said, that sort of does ring a bell in the back of my mind. I don't think something we've talked about on the podcast, but that sort of does ring a bell that there was, that I think Brandon did get involved in some of the file cards.
Okay, so that's been spoken of in an interview before or on the message boards at the time. Yeah,
it must have been. This is. I think it's not something I've thought about in many years. It must have been mentioned at the time.
True. Did you get paid money or were you given free comics?
Gosh, you know what? I don't think so. I know I didn't get paid.
Okay.
Yeah, I may have gotten a few things sent. In fact, Brandon did send me a few things. He would get some things in the mail, oftentimes from Hasbro if he was talking about a new figure. And I know, like for instance, we did. Gosh, it was the Steel Brigade pack that we did the file cards, and then the matching Cobra pack would have been. It was the Plague, I believe, and so we did the file cards for those. I think I took 2 characters and he took 2, or if there was a 5 pack, I think I took 2 and he took 3. where we came up with even the names and everything. And I believe he was sent a few of those, and he was gracious enough to turn around and send me some of the prize as well. But that was about it.
I remember Brandon said that he created Wraith and wasn't even sent a figure of that.
Oh, that's terrible.
Oh dear. Well, I guess you were involved in the sort of coming up, supporting Brandon when he was coming up with Wraith and the whole extra backup story for that, right?
Oh yeah, that's in the scripts here next to me, and that was exciting. Between that and the Snake Eyes Declassified and whatnot were some of my favorite.
Drew, was any of this? Did you think that you might get into comics as a writer or as an editor? Was this part of any idea in that direction? No,
it was purely just out of interest, and actually, I found out through helping him just how much work it was, and it's a colossal amount of work. And if anything, it dissuaded me from any future volunteering. It was a great thing. I was so happy I did. It was a great experience. It was fun to kind of, in a very small way, put my thumbprint on the hobby in an official capacity, just to say I was there, kind of thing. But no, it didn't translate into anything further. At the time, I was working as a special investigator for the Office of Personnel Management, and it was a job that just had me going on details and kind of pulling me all over the place. So I just didn't have much time to do anything else.
I think you mentioned that towards the end it was the kids coming on the scene as well, sort of just switched the whole dynamic of how much time you've got free for extra things.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Is that the story of? Is that the reason that you stopped being military consultant for the comic?
I think it did basically get it to be too much. I want to say I helped him for, it was a better part of 2 years, if not 2 years on the head. And towards the end there, I think I had a conversation with him, if I recall correctly, and I could be wrong. Brandon might remember better, but I think I just told him, I said, this has been so great, and I just, I don't know if I have time for this anymore, as the kids are getting older and et cetera. And it was, I basically gave him permission. I said, if you want to look for it, if you want to find someone else to help out, that'd be wonderful.
You can see other consultants.
yeah, right, exactly. That's a good way to put it.
I won't take it personally, yeah.
I have a close friend, Todd Weinzerl, who was the head of Magnum 6 Delta. He was in the military as well. And I want to say at the time, I kind of pointed Brandon towards Todd. Todd, I know, helped us out with some of the Snake Eyes stuff. Declassified stuff. He may have even been credited in that book. I hope he was.
I was having a look just earlier to see if I could spot a credit for you. I've not been through every single issue, but I couldn't spot a consultant's credit. Let me just reach across and I'll grab my copy just to be sure.
I believe for the Snake Eyes series, I think what happened was, and Brandon was disgusted. He God love him, he apologized profusely, but I think the actual individual issues came out and they had forgotten to put my name in. And then when they did the trade paperback, both Todd and I were inserted into that as a correction, but we didn't make the actual issues.
Right. Yeah, I'm just looking at the front. I can't, of the individual issues. I can't see it.
Mm-hmm. Drew, toward the end of Brandon Jerwa's run on G.I. Joe, his final arc his final story is it's a little rushed, a lot gets crammed in, and we had him on the show and he talked about how the book ended so that a new G.I. Joe series could start with a new writer. And in the promotions for that new comic, Devil's Due stated that the new comic would be great for established fans, but also welcoming for new fans. And so Jerwa didn't get to tell the longer story that he had envisioned over many, many more months. And also we know that from interviewing Josh Blaylock that Devil's Due had a, at times, challenging relationship with Hasbro because Hasbro was figuring out its sort of comfort level with G.I. Joe in 2004, 2005. And also dealing with other licensors, the Transformers comic, for example, and in dealing with all the other brands. So did you have a sense, it's a two-part question, that for Brandon Jerwa, things were getting truncated did you have a sense that a couple years into Devil's Due's relationship with Hasbro, things were not always like the back and forth wasn't always sort of smooth?
Yes, I'm not sure I knew the level that you speak of between, let's say, Devil's Due and Hasbro, but I do recall, and there's nothing that I could even remotely say negative about Brandon. He was absolutely wonderful. I considered him to be a friend, and he was a wonderful creator. This guy would have a vision for issues and issues and issues ahead, and he wanted to tell the story in his way, at his pacing. And it was remarkable to work with someone with this kind of creativity. I can't say enough good about him. And I learned a lot from him, but I did know that, and I hope I don't overspeak, but he did get rushed. There were some pressures, at least from the Devil's Due to Brandon Jerwa level, that I didn't think were fair. Of course, I didn't know the whole story, if they were getting pressured then from Hasbro. I do recall he was forced to tie it up real quick, and it wasn't how he wanted to, because it wasn't how the story was planned out in his mind, which was unfortunate, because I think he would have told an even better story, let's just say.
Yeah, I mean, sort of as a reader, even probably not knowing the wranglings, the sort of interior wranglings of Devil's Due at the time, it kind of does feel quite rushed. It was called the Union of the Snake, was, I guess, the main Cobra plot, which sort of was very curtailed very quickly with sort of a nuclear explosion on Cobra Island, and sort of Cobra getting defeated and by the small G.I. Joe team. And then the Dawn of the Red Shadows was the follow-up arc, which was essentially 4 issues contained in 2 double-sized issues, where again it sort of feels very compressed, that you're introducing the characters but then also defeating them within the space of two issues.
And those 2 issues, didn't we establish those were published in the same month, or they're cover dated the same month?
Yeah, I don't know whether you had any sort of more thoughts on that, or memories of that compressed period of trying to just resolve that plot, the sort of the long plot that had been planned within a very short space of time.
By the time the Red Shadows arc hit, I think that was about, I think I had pretty much been done with the consultation just prior to that. So while I knew of it, I think at that point Brandon was kind of doing it more on his own, even though my name remained in the book. I don't want to break any kind of confidentiality, but he really had some frustrations, rightfully so, about the pressures he was getting. And I felt bad for him, but he did the best he could. In fact, I think he did a brilliant job wrapping up as neatly as he possibly could in such a short period of time some of those ideas he had. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I do have pretty strong memories of just understanding that he wasn't able to be as creative as he wanted to at the end, which I think came through in the books. And you'd also see that come through in some comments from people who didn't know, and that's okay. That's when people aren't in the know, they assume, and he may have gotten a little bit of criticism about some of those stories when it actually wasn't his fault. He did the best he could.
Yeah, and I think it was one of his last issues, was it 41, I think, off the top of my head. I think Josh Blaylock was credited as a co-writer, unusually, so I get sort of pointing to Devil's Due, directing him a little bit more than maybe they normally would have done. Mm-hmm. Did you get the sense that for most of until those last few issues, that Brandon had quite a free hand to do much as he wanted? Yeah.
I mean, everything had to run past them once we had it kind of finalized, and I want to say there was maybe a few little changes here and there that had to be made, but he had a pretty free reign, and that's where some of the creative stuff that we had fun with came about. How we would develop this or that storyline. There's a little joke I tell people when they ask me about it. I said one of the things I remember personally is probably saving Footloose about 13 times throughout the run because he was a favorite character of mine, and just about every time Brandon's like, all right, can we kill off Footloose yet? I'm like, no, you can't kill off Footloose. And so if somebody had to die or a character had to meet his demise, it was it was we picked someone else instead of Footloose, but he started to understand that Footloose was untouchable at some point, so that was good. But it was fun.
He might have appeared a little bit more at least before he died.
I
didn't get a huge amount of page time, poor Footloose.
Something that I didn't get to say in our previous episode about the Devil's Due run, where Mark and I went over issue 43, Jerwa's final issue. My favorite line of dialogue from that issue, Wilder Vaughn, the villain, the main Red Shadow, on page 6, is talking about the plot. And he says, all timelines will be accelerated. And I thought, this might be Brandon Jerwa having a little fun with the reader, where a character in the story is saying something that makes sense in the story, but is commenting on what Jerwa, the writer, and sort of all the readers are experiencing, where all timelines will be accelerated.
Yes.
Sort of, there's that joke in season 3 of Arrested Development where the Bluth family is dealing with this order of houses that they're going to build, and the order is cut from 21 to like 17. And they keep saying like, oh, the order's been cut from 21 to 17. And that's because Fox had cut the number of orders, the number of episodes for this third and now final season of Arrested Development from whatever the number was, like 21 to 17.
Just a comment on that real quick. I have to say,
Sure.
Brandon is very, very intelligent. And I think there were a number of times throughout his series that he was able to have a little tongue-in-cheek in there that, probably went over a lot of people's heads, but not everyone. So it doesn't surprise me at all that he would have that in there.
I had a very specific question, and if you've not reread the issues recently, it might be a little bit too specific. But in I think it's that issue 41 where Union of the Snake is being wrapped up. One of the, I guess, big concluding moments is the nuclear attack by G.I. Joe on Cobra Island, which Tim was less fond of, with your military consultation hat on as well. What do you have any memories of that particular decision or that storytelling moment?
I don't. I'm sorry, Mark. That may have been, like I said, I've got right in front of me, I've got all the way up through script 39. And so I'm not sure how much after 39 I had involvement in. I'm sorry.
No worries.
So these are printouts after Jerwa emailed them to you at the time.
Correct. Yep.
And did you mark up your copies of these scripts?
Oh yeah. Yep. That's what I would do, is print them out, kind of go through them hard copy wise with the red pen, the classic thing, and circle things and put question mark by things and other suggestions in the sidebars and etc. I don't know. Maybe on eBay these would be worth a lot of money. I have no idea, but
something anyway. Have you had a little look back on them? Was there anything that jumped out from your red penned notes?
This is terrible, but I did not look through them. I apologize. I probably could have been a little better prepared to give your content a little bit.
It's okay. Once again, you are giving of yourself to G.I. Joe and not getting paid. So we didn't expect you. That you're even here talking to us is payment enough for us, right? So we didn't expect anything.
There was one point that you mentioned that you wanted to come back to, is that you said that various people helped peripherally on the book. Yeah. So I thought I'd just circle back to let you talk to what that was.
Yeah, 3 guys in particular. I mentioned Todd, who was a close friend of mine, still is. And he helped a great deal with, if I even had some military questions. Todd he's a little younger than me, and he was in the military a little more recently, while the books were, actually maybe even during the time, now that I think about it. So he could kind of, some things that had come up, in terms of military technology, vehicles, different procedures, etc. He would kind of help me out with things if I had a question. So Todd was invaluable. Todd also helped a lot with, he's a whiz at graphics and whatnot, so he could help out with any kind of logos or anything we wanted to do that made sense. At the time, there was also Fred Meyer of JBL, which you guys have, I'm guessing, maybe talked to, and if you haven't, you should. He was someone who was wonderful online for the community, still is, and Fred and I would talk as well. And the person that I want to bring up too, that I really had a lot of ongoing conversation with while I was helping Brandon, who supported me with ideas as well, was Chris Chung. And Chris was kind of on the Joe Sightings board quite a bit under the name Werecat. But Chris is a very talented writer, and so his consultation more in the sense of how a story would come out, the pacing and meter of a story, something that was valuable if I were going to have a new idea for Brandon to kind of roll around in his head to see if he liked. So those three guys were definitely on the backstage, but part of it for me.
Did you keep buying and or reading the comic after Jerwa's run ended and the next run started? I
didn't. I think I was, well, let's just say everybody's got their favorites, and I think I was okay with being done with the direction the book was going and the writers until Larry took over again. When Larry took over again, I started reading again. So I've kind of read, I've tried to keep a few issues behind right now, but I've kept up with Larry Hama's storyline to the present time.
Very good. You preempted my next question. So you've kept up to date with the world of G.I. Joe comics at any rate. Have you still kept on collecting toys? Do you have a basement room with a massive setup of a battle somewhere, or
No, I've got a new set of little kids, so that's not possible. But I kind of did it all over again. But I kind of the opposite. I've been downsizing, but I did keep up. I would say up until maybe 3-4 years ago, I kept up. Recently, not so much. In fact, I'm kind of going the other direction. But there again, remember, I'm an old guy pushing 50, so at some point, I got to let someone else have fun with them.
Fair enough. Yeah, much of my Joe toy collecting now is through the lens of an 11-year-old who actually takes them out of the packets and has battles with them on the floor. So
absolutely. Actually, I should say this: the new Declassified line is nice, and so my little guy who's going to be turning 7 pretty quick, and I have been having fun with that. So we do still buy the toys, I guess. Now that I think of it, just a little different scale.
Is there a comic book store near you?
Yes, there is. Yeah, there's one in downtown La Crosse, and we do go there once in a while.
Okay, so that's where you get the current IDW issues.
Yes.
Are there other comics you're buying and reading, or are you just a G.I. Joe guy?
Just a G.I. Joe guy at this point. Whittle it all down to that. Yeah, I think at some point I read Transformers. I read a lot of the 80s pop culture comics, so maybe Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles here and there. What else did I read? My gosh. Just about anything that kind of came along that reminded me of the 80s. That was fun to pick up for a while, and even with the G.I. Joe comic books, I kind of whittled it down to just something that Larry Hama penned. If there was anything else, any other offshoots or iterations, I would leave those alone.
Uh-huh. And are you excited to follow the new adventures of a real American hero wherever that lands at a new publisher at some point soon?
Yeah, I am excited. I'm looking forward to it. I'll pick up the first couple of issues. I'll definitely give it a fair shake. I think Larry himself has hinted that, there might be more to come from him with the new one.
Yep. As at time of recording, he's said that he's written 301 and 302. So we will see more of Larry Hama.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually didn't know that. That's good to know. Wonderful.
Now you know.
There you go.
So is there anything that we should have asked you about your time sort of collaborating at Devil's Due, which we haven't?
Gosh.
I had one.
No, go ahead.
Drew, did you ever meet Brandon Jerwa in person?
Good question.
Did you go to any of these conventions where Devil's Due had a presence?
Well, that's a great question. I did not. I don't think I met Brandon in person. As fun as it sounds, we talked all the time. And I know he went to some conventions that I didn't. And I went to probably 4 or 5 total Joe conventions from 2003 to the final, but they were not ones that he attended. So no, I honestly, I hope I'm not wrong, and I did meet him, but I don't think I met him in person.
So if Devil's Due was there, it's not like you necessarily went up and said, "Hello, I'm Andrew Swenson, your military consultant."
Well, I was at a convention before I was that, and then I don't think I was at the convention until maybe 2007. So it was during the time that I was helping. I did not attend any conventions, so it wouldn't have been an opportunity to do that where I could, maybe even sit behind the table or certainly have a chat with, Josh in that group. So no, it just didn't match up very well that way. Unfortunately, I was never offered a plane ticket or a hotel room to join them. So no.
And have you actually met Brandon in the intervening years since, and have you stayed in contact?
No, that's a good question. We haven't stayed in contact, and I'm not quite sure why, because we certainly had a wonderful time talking back and forth. Good relationship, very solid. And I think he just got kind of busy with life out there in the upper West Coast, and I was busy with my life and kids, and you just kind of grew apart. I think if we picked up the phone and talked back and forth, we'd catch up like old times pretty quick. But it's been quite a while.
So I have two reactions. One, I think rather than being sad as a fan, right? Because as a fan, you sort of think or hope that everyone knows everyone. It's like, well, of course, like even if the writer and artist, colorist, letterer, editor, they're not sitting in the same room, but they all know each other because they're all working on this comic. They all get paid by the same company. And then you find out that's, definitely not true. So I think, one, you are just speaking to a positive professional relationship that was friendly, but if you guys had been in the same city, no doubt you would have met up for coffee.
Oh, sure.
If timing had been a little different, no doubt you would have hung out at a convention. The other thing this makes me think of is how at some points in the next year or 10, someone, and I don't know who it is, maybe it's Mark and me in a future live edition of Talking Joe, or maybe it's some other intrepid G.I. Joe fan, convention organizer, something, journalist. There should be a panel at a convention where it's a reunion, and several people from a certain era of G.I. Joe, let's say the middle segment of Devil's Due, sit around a table or sit up on a stage and just talk. And it happens to be recorded, and then people get to listen to it. And, there'd be the little sort of hook of, oh, well, Jerwa and Swenson get to meet each other for the first time.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
I'm gonna put a very nebulous pin in this and say that Mark and I will think about what a good idea this is, and maybe one day someone will do it.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
And
to remark further on our relationship, I remember, so we'd talk G.I. Joe and stuff, but we had gotten to a point where, he'd give me a call and just let me know what was going on with his life. Everybody's got ups and downs in their lives and struggles and that sort of thing. And we definitely got to a familiar basis where, I'd kind of need his consultation just on a personal level and vice versa. So that was wonderful. So that would be great just to sit down and hang with Brandon again.
The reason why I think of this is that when Shout Factory re-released all the G.I. Joe episodes in a box set and re-released all the Transformers episodes in a DVD box set, what was it, 10 years ago? This was like fixing some of the mistakes from the previous Rhino home video DVD sets. Shout Factory got a bunch of the voice actors from the 80s G.I. Joe cartoon and the 80s Transformers cartoon, which of course are the same people, and put them in 10 chairs next to each other and just had them talk and put a camera on it. And that was a bonus feature that wasn't included on the season sets, but was included on the big box set. And I believe those have made their way to YouTube. And that's such a treat, because it's one thing when at one of these conventions, the audience is asking questions of one or two voice actors, or one voice actor and one writer. It's another question when 5 or 6 or 10 voice actors get to just talk amongst themselves and we get to watch. And, with sort of fan culture and fan journalism, like a podcast like Talking Joe, where Mark's finding cool interviews to conduct, we can sort of reactivate these times, these eras, these relationships. And so if you're listening to this and you're planning a G.I. Joe convention in the next 5 or 10 years, please take this idea. And I don't even need credit. Someone have a Devil's Due reunion panel. And if it's at a convention, it's not a podcast, someone please record it.
Yeah, those things are worth their weight in gold, aren't they?
I'm feeling this way also particularly because I just attended a little G.I. Joe convention and I was struck several times by the sort of the little magical moments and interactions that you can only have in person that you don't plan for, that don't happen when you're talking to one person at a time or in a thread online. That it's different when you're there and it's different when you get a bunch of people to all be there. And, you know, I think we've all been at some comic book convention when we like saw some cool panel, and maybe this is before 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20 years ago, before the internet was what it is now. I remember I was at a convention in like 2002 and Jeff Smith was interviewing Will Eisner.
Wow.
And I thought, why isn't someone recording this with a video camera? And that's not the culture of conventions at that time. You know, panels were these like awesome one-off live events. And if you were lucky enough to be there, you were lucky enough to be there. And now when I go to conventions, or more recently, panels do tend to be videotaped, even if, you know, I'm not always sure what the organizers are doing with them. And sometimes they're being live streamed right then, and that's great. Anyway, let's talk about G.I. Joe again.
I had just something to mention to Drew. If you're not plugged into all of the latest happenings of G.I. Joe news, you might not have heard that that Brandon Jerwa has actually got a job now working on the G.I. Joe video game.
Oh wow! No, I hadn't heard that. That's fantastic.
So the circle is complete. Like, yeah, almost 20 years on, he is back working on the property in some form. So it's very cool to have him back.
Very cool. Yeah, you combine that kind of passion and talent, and it's wonderful to have him back.
Mark, just so I can be reminded and we can be specific for our listeners, does this game have a subtitle? Is this a game that has been out? Is this coming out? Is this an expansion?
Well, this is a brand new. It's the what do they call it? It's like an A class game. It's like a proper big budget, big studio game. Brandon Jerwa has been announced as the senior narrative designer for the G.I. Joe game, which is, I believe, called Snake Eyes, and it is coming from a sort of new game studio called Atomic Arcade. I think it sits under the company Wizards, as in like linked to Wizards of the Coast,
which Hasbro owns.
We don't know a huge amount of detail, other than it sounds like they're taking this game serious, so that we're going to get a proper big budget. They call it a AAA title.
That makes sense. I think I mentioned this earlier, but we were approached by Wizards when they did the trading card game briefly. It was really a wonderful game, I thought. But we approached to them. They wanted to put out the little pamphlet with the starter set, and so we did the write-ups for all the characters inside that pamphlet. And that was definitely a nice relationship with, I want to say it was Aaron at Wizards, but he was the head of that G.I. Joe game project. Uh-huh. And so for them to call back on Brandon, though, makes perfect sense, because I think they were pretty pleased with what they got from us.
So yeah, I think we've covered most of the ground. Is there anything that we've not yet asked you, Drew, that we should have?
Man, I mean, I don't think so. No.
Favorite issue of the original Marvel comic, favorite issue of the Devil's Due comic?
Man, I mean, I could say the Snake Eyes Declassified was my favorite to work on for sure. Favorite issue of Marvel. Man, you could pick anything almost, but let's say issue number 18. Why?
What about issue number 18?
Oh man, I just remember as a kid, I remember the cover with Destro standing there, and it was one of the earlier ones that introduced me to the various vehicles. Some of the new characters, I want to say, that came out. What did Duke and Roadblock hit? Was it 17 or 18 or something like that? Oh, anyway,
Duke and Roadblock show up right around there because they're at Flag's funeral.
Yeah.
So I think the comic was really picking up some really neat speed around then, going from little bit stories to kind of a bigger overarching story. Yeah, I don't have a really good answer for you. Sorry about that.
That's okay. This is a pretty good answer.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not one that's normally picked. So yeah, Destro returns. It's the cover with Destro and Cobra Commander sort of standing in front of a monitor, and then on the
That's
monitor
it.
there's a
Part of what you've said, Drew, is that you liked the series so much, any one issue may not stand out anymore because you like the series so much.
Oh, right.
So that might speak to your level of excitement that's sustained over a time, and also the consistency of the book, as opposed to someone saying, "Oh, this issue because like my favorite character," or "This issue because like that cool thing happened that people always talk about."
Tim, you're good at bailing people out. I appreciate that. But that was fantastic. I do actually remember 49 and 50 being huge favorites with the whole Springfield and the war where you got everybody involved. So that'll always stand out in my mind too.
And you mentioned your work on Snake Eyes Declassified, and it's an interesting project and quite different to most comics projects, really, because it's not just a brand new story. It's sort of piecing together all of these bits, these nuggets of Snake Eyes' life that have been revealed through flashbacks over the course of the series, and then sort of filling it out with like the connecting tissue to kind of make a whole story out of it. Was there sort of particular memories of working on that series that sort of make it stand out? I
think just understanding the importance of it, understanding and how to get it right, painstakingly making sure that nothing. And I'm not saying it was perfect. I bet there's someone out there who could maybe find a little bit of an overlap or a flaw, but we really tried hard to make sure the continuity was all there based on the original Marvel run and etc. All creative credit to Brandon on that one, but I was there as a sounding board, and there again, kind of doing some double checks on things, and maybe just offering a little bit here and there. But for the most part, it was just exciting to do, because who doesn't love the Snake Eyes origin overall? I mean, it's just such an integral part of the property.
Excellent. So yeah, I think we probably have sort of reached the end of our talk there. Normally, I'll give our guests an opportunity to say where they can be found and the things that they've got to promote.
Oh gosh, no.
So Drew hasn't got any products to plug at this stage, I don't think. But Tim, where can people find you when you're not talking about G.I. Joe things, or find you talking about other G.I. Joe things? I could say as well.
Video essays on television and film at atomicabe.com and our YouTube page, Atomic Abe Productions, my brick and mortar comic book store, Hub Comics in Somerville, Massachusetts. And I write about G.I. Joe at my blog, arealamericanbook.com.
Excellent. And everyone can find out more about the show at talkingjoe.co.uk. That's the website that has links to everything, like our Facebook page, our Twitter page, if that still exists by the time this podcast comes out, Instagram, and all of that good jazz. We're on Patreon, and a big thanks to our backers, Richard, Sam, Jay, Bill, Christopher, Justin, Rob, and Brian, who are getting early access to episodes and other exclusive content. And I think that's us done. But remember that
nobody beats Talking Joe, an international podcast!
Laters.
Cheers. Thanks a lot, guys.